Juror defends verdict in Sean Diddy Combs trial amid public outcry. A juror in the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs is speaking out in defense of the jury's decision, rejecting claims that the hip-hop mogul's celebrity status swayed their judgment. Following the controversial verdict that saw Combs convicted of lesser charges while being acquitted of the more severe allegations, public reaction has been intense, especially from critics who believe justice was not fully served. In an exclusive interview with ABC News, the unnamed juror expressed frustration at the criticism, calling it highly insulting and belittling to the jury and the deliberation process. They emphasized that the deliberations were lengthy and thoughtful, lasting over 2 days, and were guided strictly by the legal instructions provided and the evidence presented during the 7-week trial. "We would have treated any defendant in the same manner regardless of who they are," the juror said, pushing back against the widespread notion that Combs' wealth, fame, and influence played any role in their final decision. The trial, which concluded on July 2, resulted in Combs being found guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. These charges carry significant penalties, but he was acquitted of the far more serious accusations of sex trafficking and racketeering, charges that could have resulted in a life sentence if he had been convicted. Combs has been in federal custody since his arrest in September 2024. Despite his legal team's request for release on a $1 million bond, the judge ruled that the music mogul should remain behind bars until his sentencing hearing, which is currently scheduled for October 3. His legal team is now seeking to move the sentencing date up, although no ruling has been made on that motion yet. During the trial, prosecutors painted a dark and damning picture of Combs, accusing him of operating a criminal enterprise that involved the exploitation and trafficking of women. Central to the prosecution's case were the testimonies of Combs' ex-girlfriend, singer Cassie Ventura, and another woman identified only as Jane. Both women provided graphic and emotional accounts of alleged abuse, coercion, and trafficking, recounting disturbing details of how they were manipulated and harmed by Combs and his associates. Despite the gravity of these accusations, the jury did not find the prosecution's evidence sufficient to support convictions on all counts. Their decision has triggered a wave of criticism online and across media outlets, with many commentators questioning whether the outcome would have been different if the defendant were not a powerful celebrity with deep pockets and a high-profile legal team. However, according to the juror who spoke out, the jury's responsibility was not to make decisions based on emotion or public sentiment but on the law. "We carefully examined each count," they said. "We discussed the testimony, the exhibits, the timelines, everything. It wasn't easy and there were disagreements, but in the end we came to a consensus based solely on what we were presented with in court." The juror also acknowledged the complexity of the case and the difficulty in weighing emotionally charged testimonies against legal standards of proof. "We heard from multiple witnesses, we saw evidence, but ultimately, some of the charges didn't meet the burden of proof required for a conviction," they explained. Legal analysts have also weighed in, with some noting that sex trafficking cases are notoriously difficult to prosecute, especially when they rely heavily on the testimony of alleged victims and circumstantial evidence. Others argue that the jury's split verdict reflects a reasonable interpretation of the evidence, even if the outcome is disappointing to some observers. Still, for many survivors and advocates, the verdict feels like a setback. Online, hashtags calling for justice for the victims have trended since the verdict was announced. Some activists argue that the case exposes systemic flaws in how the legal system handles powerful defendants, especially in cases involving sexual misconduct and abuse. Meanwhile, Combs' legal team has expressed both relief and resolve. In a statement released after the verdict, one of his attorneys said, "While we are disappointed with the partial convictions, we are pleased that the jury saw through the government's attempt to turn this into a sensationalized show trial. Mr. Combs maintains his innocence and will continue to fight for his freedom." As the October sentencing date approaches, attention will now turn to what kind of punishment the Bad Boy Records founder may face for the 2 prostitution-related charges. Although these are lesser than the original allegations, they are still serious federal offenses and could carry several years in prison. The case has already made a significant impact on the public conversation around celebrity, accountability, and justice. Whether seen as a partial win for survivors or a partial vindication for Combs, the outcome is likely to be debated for months to come. For now, the juror who spoke out hopes the public will understand that the process was rigorous and honest. "We did our job," they said. "We listened, we deliberated, and we followed the law. That's all anyone can ask of a jury."